Just a quick warning, this episode contains some strong language, so be advised, shit's about to get real.
I love actors.
Meet Rachel Meyer, Counterintelligence's casting director. In the past year since we wrapped, she's moved to LA to produce features, and I have no doubt she's killing it. My nickname for her is Killa. She's hyper detail-oriented, organized, and efficient. Basically, she waits on you.
If I think back to my childhood and high school and whatnot, when I was just obsessed with movies, like we all were, actors are who I would know. Like, it's like, oh, who's in that? You know, it wasn't about the director, anyone, no offense, but it was the actors. And I love seeing a cast come together and seeing the chemistry between those actors.
I think a lot of filmmakers get that. I certainly do. When I was a kid and getting into filmmaking, I wanted to be an actor first because that's who represents movies. And early on, or even for most regular viewers, that's who's first associated with them. They're the face. And that's one reason why casting is so absolutely crucial. Your movie lives and dies on who fills out each character and how they do. In the past, I've made films with great talent, and I've also made them with, On Counterintelligence, I decided I couldn't have any which is why I decided it was time to find a casting director. In this episode, you'll hear about why casting directors are so extremely valuable to a production, what they do to help bring a film to life, some challenges faced by our casting process, how we set up casting, wrangled auditions, saved money, and made some tough decisions. Then, after the break, we're going to dive deep into the weeds and talk about money and time, how casting director rates work, if they'll take back-end points as payment, how their contracts and actors' contracts work, and then, for those of you who absolutely can't afford a casting director but need to make your movie, Rachel gives her entire workflow for you to follow. From how she organizes the minutia, to how she maximizes audition turnout, and inevitably locks in amazing talent. You want to learn to kill it? Listen to a killer. Let's cast this movie.
A free film. For no money, for no anything. Half of the battle to make it a good film in the United States. A free film, I say good film, it's a free film. Whether it's good or bad, we don't know. But we'll put a year in for no money, for no anything. Simply because there's an expression that has to be said. Now, we don't have any reverence for this expression. We don't believe it's a church. We have to have a good time, otherwise we die. I mean, how much does this cost? You know, paper to do the hard work, and how much does reels cost? We get it all from the major studios. They help us destroy them. That's the way we work. Because if we make a good film, they will only suffer. And as they suffer, they come and they say, please make films for us. And we say, no, we don't want to make films for you. Hip, hip, hooray.
Kick off. I came to decide on a casting director because of the level of work involved in solidifying a really solid cast, which is what I decided I needed.
A casting director runs the auditioning process for the film. They contact the agents, they bring in actors, schedule the auditions, and work with the directors and producers to lock down the most ideal cast for their project. It's really a magical balance because I want to give the director plenty of options to choose from, but I don't want to waste their time with actors that would clearly not be cast.
Thing is, a casting director is your first set of eyes on the face of your film. They make the initial leap into collecting talent who could represent your vision on screen, so you really want to find someone you can relate to and trust. The other big thing they do is help efficiency. A lot.
And especially geared towards, micro-budget features, and coming from that myself, there is so much that you have on your plate already when you're producing, directing, and taking on all these hats. There's so much that you have to worry about. And casting is a huge undertaking on top of it all if you are going the audition route.
For a little history, before she was a world-class casting director, Ms. Meyer was an actress and producer. Overachiever much? Then she took on casting when she realized how many great actors in her area she knew how many relationships with agencies she had, and how she'd come to understand the background business of talent through producing and casting her own productions with her old company. Basically, it was one of her favorite parts of the filmmaking process, so she fell into it. Because when it works...
During the auditioning process, when the director is just like, okay, this is who I'm casting, that's really exciting for me, especially if I agree.
And when it's all coming together for real...
They're all officially cast, and they're in the room together, and you see the chemistry between them. You see the different looks. You see how they'll come together as a cast in the project. That's the most exciting part.
If at this point you're sold, you're like, I need to get a casting director, stat. One thing you may wonder if you've never done this before, what do I look for?
Just like everyone else in the world, casting directors have very different personalities. And I would look for someone who seems like, first of all, genuinely interested in your script or project. And second of all, has been recommended by at least one other person who has worked with them, or you've at least reached out to someone to confirm that they had a good experience with them, like someone to back them up.
This is exactly what I did. See, I'm not great at what they call networking. It's not that I don't meet people in filmmaking, I just don't go out of my way to do it. I have good friends, and I really like hanging out with people who do other things, for perspective and stuff. But I do know someone who is amazing at networking. His name's Chris Buechel. He's another filmmaker. He's a local director, and he knows everybody who knows everybody. So I called him up. Hey man, you know any good casting directors? He instantly put me in touch with Rachel. We exchanged some emails, I sent her the script, and my only stipulation was that she only take the project if she was into the material. A few days later, it turned out she was. So we exchanged a few more emails and met for coffee, and it was on. It doesn't hurt to leverage someone else's connections. As long as you're not an asshole, it reflects well on everybody involved. Don't be an asshole. For a plethora of reasons.
Personality is just so important because, you will be spending, at least a few very long, tedious days in the audition room together, and bouncing off one another, ideas on each actor and stuff. So it is it's like camp.
Camp is a great analogy. You may feel you barely know your casting director at first, but after a day or more in a room with them, reviewing actors and bullshitting between auditions and no-shows, you'll get to know them well. So yeah, camp, audition camp. And again, if you're not an asshole and they're not an asshole, you may end up with a collaborator and friend for the future. In this case, it did work out well, but you're not the only one with criteria to look for. Your potential casting director has expectations too. So
I feel that I'm a pretty good judge of character. And if I met a new filmmaker and had any red flags come up, I would decline the project within our first meeting. Because when I'm casting, I'm not only looking out for the director, but also the actors. And I would never want to be in a situation where I cast a project and the actors come back to me afterwards and tell me how horrible or unprofessional the experience was. I wouldn't want my name on that project. She does her homework. She asks around. That's how these things work. She asked Chris Buechel how I was. Fortunately, the reviews were good, but it's hard to know what's good if you haven't experienced the assholes. Recommendations really go a long way. If there's a director or whoever in town and he has dicked actors over or mistreated them in any way, that gets around too. It's pretty easy in a town like Portland to figure out who to work for and who not to, I think. This is true of almost any crew member and collaborator, especially on a low budget. There are behaviors to avoid, and some of them you yourself want to look out for in the casting process. There's etiquette, and a slight step over that line can get bad. I have had auditions where I have had a talk in between the auditions where I say, okay, we don't have to cut them off in that way, or we can, this is the first audition, so we don't have to direct and redirect, and that's for the callback, that. Save that so that we're not eating up all the time and making them more nervous than they need to be. You save the redirections and whatnot for the callbacks when you really want to work and make sure you can work with the actor.
And part of her experience comes from the other side of auditions.
I'm an actor too, and have been to those auditions, like to walk into the room and have the casting director and the director and everyone be kind and patient and nice makes all the difference. I could still go on the audition, but still feel good about it because we connected as humans. And it wasn't this, oh, we're better than you and going to sit here and judge you, and reject you to your face mentality. And so it really does go a long way to kind of protect that vulnerability of actors. And then as actors, the goal is to use those nerves in your audition instead of letting them overtake you, and really allow them to energize you and energize your performance of the role.
So once I landed on Killa to cast Counterintelligence after our coffee meeting, it was time for her to get going.
I can actually picture myself sitting in my backyard with coffee, reading your script and just writing down. I had a notepad and your script in my lap, and I would just go through and write down each character. And then with you, though, I think you gave me the character names that you needed.
The principals, the really deep and challenging roles. At coffee, I told her who, what, and why, and she was game. I also made a point of asking, what if I'm able to fill up more roles, even though we're only casting for these 4, and she assured me that was totally cool. It required no extra work for her. I'm all about transparency, and you should be too. Some surprises can look like ulterior motives, which can reflect really bad on you and make it look like you're taking advantage of somebody's time, and I'm really glad I asked because, lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. I ended up casting almost every single character in those 2 days of auditions. Don't count on this, though. That's just luck, which you'll see we were fortunate enough to have a couple times. So anyway, at that point, she goes through all the characters she's supposed to cast.
Sometimes a writer is very specific within the script about the characters they're looking for, like right down to their height and length of hair. But other times they're a little more vague, which allows me to bring in more of a variety of actors, which can be a lot of fun. And I really like to try to surprise myself and the director by bringing in a few actors that could bring something really unique and not yet discovered to the role, into the audition with them.
Listen close, she really relishes in this part.
Sometimes, as I'm reading the script, I'll immediately think of actors that I know would fit the role. This is kind of an exciting part of the process too, where I'm picturing someone as I'm reading and I can't get them out of my head. Actors I know that I'd like to cast in it. And then I'll do a character breakdown for each role, including the character's age range, sex, physical description, and personality traits. And I'll usually work with the director or writer on these breakdowns to make sure that everything important is included. Some directors will already have breakdowns too, and so I just kind of finesse them or make sure that everything important is there.
I gave her my broad descriptions with some specifics for a few characters. Like with one character, it was really important for him to be a guy who was a dominating presence while being slightly approachable, and you couldn't tell whether he was on the right or wrong foot.
I've just had a little bit too much coffee. Past my bedtime, kind of thing.
Rachel took notes on all this, and we solidified some other details.
I'll work with the director or producers on how many days the actor will be needed and the projected shoot dates if they have those.
There was one caveat, though, before we could really get rolling.
We were going in at non-SAG, and I was like, could I please bring SAG actors in as well, right?
So the Screen Actors Guild, SAG.
And then we switched it to a SAG film, right?
If you don't know, they're the actors' union. They exist mostly to provide professional actors with important things like guaranteed pay, safety requirements, pensions, all in all important stuff. But if you're a filmmaker who's never had trouble navigating their mounds of paperwork, requirements, or how should I say this, like layered communication, you're either super lucky or you're waiting. The process of working with SAG can be, to say it politely, complicated. I'd been burned in the past, which is why I initially didn't want to include SAG actors. Here's Mike Hall, my Showhawk co-founder, who you heard from about budgeting. He's talking about our first feature film, Painted City. Some of this is repetitive from last episodes.
We started production on Painted City probably 9 years ago.
We had a few $1,000s and shot it on nights and weekends over the course of about a year.
I had very, very little experience with the Screen Actors Guild. Neither of us had done a ton of research into what it would take to get a SAG member into the film.
We just didn't know, and we were intimidated, and that intimidation had stuck with me since then. But Rachel convinced me to at least audition some and be open to the possibility. And I eventually caved.
When we went into it non-SAG, I was like, oh shit, then I can't bring in Brian Cook or, a number of other actors that I absolutely loved and thought were perfect for the roles, and that's really, it's a hindrance when you're choosing one or the other, because either way you'll be missing out. Like, I don't think Sheree was SAG at the time, right? And so our two lead actors, one was SAG and one was non-SAG, and they're just as talented as one another. There's not like a divide between talent or experience.
Mike and I did have a brief encounter with SAG. We had a role for this really outstanding, experienced actor. He read the script and really wanted to do it. Only thing was, he belonged to SAG, and since we didn't have a lot of what SAG requires to allow their actors aboard a project, things like set schedule, budget, deposit, or insurance, we ended up having to cast someone else.
We should have focused a little more on doing our research around the ultra-low budget agreement for the Screen Actors Guild. The amount of talent we would have received for submissions, for talent submissions or auditions, would have been so much greater than what we actually cast and what we actually put in the film. And it would have made our film so much stronger if we had had those performances. Now, I'm not saying that everyone in the Screen Actors Guild is an amazing actor, but it opens so many more opportunities to get amazing talent into your film. And so if you're a first-time filmmaker, I would take the time to actually research a little bit into how to get these actors from a low-budget agreement. And you don't have to do everything yourself. You can hire a casting agent or hire someone with that expertise to actually do that stuff for you.
SAG can be a big hassle for filmmakers, which we'll investigate further in a future episode. But for now, there are a lot of reasons actors do or don't become SAG.
In LA, absolutely, you want to be SAG as soon as possible. In Portland, you kind of want to wait so that you can do these low budget indie projects that might not be SAG, and really be adding to your reel and experience before you become SAG.
Another thing that intimidated me a bit, agencies, as in acting agencies, but not killer.
To be completely honest, the majority of the actors that I had cast up in Portland were represented by agents. But it's not always the case. A lot of actors reaching out to the social media casting calls will not have agents, and you should still give them a chance. Absolutely. I wouldn't avoid bringing them in at all, because it may just be a case that they just moved to the area and haven't signed with an agent yet. I wouldn't avoid either, long story short. But I do tend to cast actors with agents more often than not.
More on how exactly she went about reaching out to agencies when we get into the weeds in the second half. For now, she was ready to send out invites, book the auditions, schedule, and we were off to the races.
You and I really lucked out, Chris, because the acting studio provided us with an amazing location. So Jana and Katie were just super helpful, and that was perfect because a lot of the actors coming in know the studio because they take classes there, so they're familiar with it. We had one room for actors to wait, so when they show up, they wait and they sign in, and then we had them come down the hall when we were ready for them. But for a space like that, it could be anywhere from $45 to $75 an hour.
Where will you hold auditions? There are some important considerations to maximize the experience for you and the talent.
It's important to me as a casting director to have a comfortable environment for the director and all of the actors coming in, to have a waiting area where they're comfortable and there's water and coffee and whatever else, and then another room that we have the actual auditions in. I do prefer locations where they are far enough away that you can't hear the audition happening while you're an actor, and it'll psych you out. And I've been as an actor in those auditions, and they're just horrible when you can hear the actor before you reading their lines. It's super helpful. We had Chelsea there that day to bring actors back and forth. So it's super helpful to have an assistant or someone to help with greeting the actor, bringing them down the hall into the audition is super helpful. And then I'll do that myself if we don't have someone.
You could even enlist a helpful and affable friend to be the greeter, or you could do it. As Rachel said, we had Chelsea, who I later hired to help with the SAG workflow.
And then it's just the scheduling and sticking to it and making sure, like, while you're focused as the director on the performance, I am as well, but I'm also focused on time. And I want to make sure that we're not going over the 10 minutes that I've allotted for each person, because I don't want a line out the door and to be way behind schedule. And so I will keep an eye on that and make sure we're doing okay on time.
Through the audition process, we also accepted video auditions, which are a whole nother animal.
And then with video auditions, the nerves are a lot less of an issue because the actor is able to film themselves doing the scene multiple times in the comfort of their own home. As an actor, my best auditions were video auditions for sure. And so as a casting director, I will take them just as seriously as in-person auditions. For callbacks, however, I do think it's absolutely necessary to see them in person so that the director can be working with them and making sure that they're easy to work with and directable.
Basically, I would not wish this process on my worst enemy. Actors have it tough, and the level of bravery it takes to go out on a limb and walk into a room to perform in front of strangers, then leave wondering whether you could have changed any number of minuscule things until you do or don't receive a call to let you know you did or didn't get a role. Actors deserve an enormous amount of respect, no matter how their audition goes, and some are a little rough, but you get a lot of good, and when it comes down to actually making decisions, that can make it even tougher.
That's like the biggest example of that happening in all of my casting is the senator and how it would change the film depending on who you had. Like it is just so night and day, and they were both so incredible, but it was two completely different.
In Counterintelligence, there's a role for a senator. He's supposed to be a dominant force, not likable. The kind of creep you know you've met or seen on TV and don't want to stop watching. We ended up narrowing it down to 2 incredible auditions. And when I tell you I showed the tapes to multiple people trying to get friends to basically make the decision for me because I couldn't, I mean it. Both actors gave incredible reads. They were both perfect. I could see both of them in the role, and audiences would have loved either. But their performances were 100% different and literally could have changed the tone of the movie entirely. The decision really came down to my co-producer Dre saying, "You just need to choose what movie you want to make." After a lot of thought, I decided on the great Joe Costa, and I couldn't be happier.
And don't think you have the right or privilege of speaking to me, as an equal. I wrote you a check.
Then there was another kind of complexity. Casting the male lead, Abel, was an opposite situation in the sense that Abel required only certain attributes, but most aspects of his character were pretty blank canvas. I was mostly hoping the casting process would show me who Abel was, and it did.
That could have gone several different ways. You know, it could have gone in several different directions. It was the case of bringing in more of a variety of actors. And Brian Cook, in my mind, is an absolute genius of an actor. And I think that he proved it in his audition for your film. He brought something to the table that we hadn't seen all day. And I remember having a moment after he left where we just looked at each other and we're like, what the fuck? You know, like.
It was a total what the fuck audition, and Brian eventually got the role. But we saw a lot of really, really good candidates, and I was sure to give everyone their fair shot. You really have to. Your mind can be blown over and over, so you have to approach each audition like the only audition, and use the video of them to narrow it down.
The character, Angela, was easy. I read the script and was like, it's Sheree Foxy. And I think I told you that going into it, like, I've got your girl. Here's a bunch of, like, really beautiful, amazing girls, but I know I've got your girl, and it's Sheree Foxy.
Sometimes it clicks. Even that doesn't always come easy, though. This is an area where we got lucky, but there was an added layer of complexity in the pot, one that was super important to me.
So as a casting director, anyways, aside from this, just in general, I want projects to be diverse. I do not want the entire cast to be white. You know, like it's just The way of the world, I would absolutely love every cast to be diverse and not stereotypical, like not these stereotypical side roles.
From the outset, I intended Angela to be a woman of color, which presented a unique set of obstacles where we live and we're producing, Portland, Oregon. And it was important to me because I believe that people from a wide variety of cross-sections of society deserve to see themselves in the media they consume. If the story's open, so too should be the filmmakers. It's not about moralizing or politics for me. It's just sensible. Even if you consider it from a narrative perspective, people's cultural backgrounds add layers of depth to a character. It's a no-brainer, but can also be a fine line because you do want to be focused on finding the best performer for the role. This line wouldn't be a problem in a more diverse city, but
it's a very white city. So then there's the flip side where it's like, okay, we want Angela to be a woman of color, but I have 10 amazing white actresses in her age range. But lucky for us, like Sheree's just absolutely incredible and just happens to be a woman of color, so it really worked out really well.
We did luck upon just like an insane talent. Like
yeah, totally.
Even though she was certain Sheree was our Angela and was absolutely right, she also managed to bring in a few more contenders. That said, there was a significant difference in turnout between Angela and the other characters. And
even aside from Sheree, we really had some great auditions for that role.
Yeah, we really did.
If you look at that role, a female minority compared to the other roles that were mostly male, Marcella was already cast, that we auditioned, the number of people we brought in was significantly fewer.
Our pool was a lot less than it could have been. If you make decisions like this, you have to be dedicated. Call me an optimist, I knew it would work out. The limited pool leads to the hardest part of casting. The thing that makes actors anxious. The thing that makes producers with a heart feel extremely uncomfortable.
The rejection process of the casting call, when I'm reaching out with casting calls in social media, I do get a ton of emails back. And I do not bring everyone who responds into an audition. And so that's always kind of tough, but it's just like absolutely necessary.
You need to accept it. Sometimes people are great and just not a fit. Add them to your list for future projects. You need to stay focused and sort through. Once we landed on our first picks, we did callbacks where I got to spend more time. When we called back Angela and Abel, Brian and Sheree, and they played a crucial scene and we were all in it, we knew it clicked.
I'm almost like a proud parent as a casting director, where like I've got these actors who I absolutely love, and I want them to come in and I want them to nail the audition to impress the director, whoever I'm working with, you in this case. And so to have them both come in and just fucking nail it, and then have their call back and see them work together and have that chemistry and awesomeness, that was really exciting. I think I was smiling pretty wide during their callbacks together.
The process was invigorating and everything I'd hoped it would be. Rachel was the perfect collaborator and brought me so many more great collaborators. I couldn't be more pleased and thankful. The thing is, I was lucky. I was lucky to have the resources, or to have made the resources to work with Killa. I'm lucky to live in a town that has an acting scene with agencies and a tight-knit community. I'm lucky there are other filmmakers like Chris Buchel in this town who could recommend Rachel. So, what if you don't live in a town like this? Or what if you just straight up don't have the budget and need to bootstrap the casting process yourself? Now, into the weeds. In the second half, we're going to go from how to find a casting director if you want one, and how to handle things like rates and paperwork, all the way through how Rachel does her entire job so you can replicate her workflow and organization if you don't have the finances to bring someone like her aboard. If you do, but don't have a lot of industry connections in your town, you don't have a Chris Buchel, how do you find a casting director?
Because the talent agents and the casting directors really work hand in hand every day, and they all know each other. So that's how I go about it, is emailing an agent and saying, hey, I'm looking to cast my film. I need a casting director. Do you have any recommendations for a budget of this size or whatever?
I'd Google your city and acting agency and see what comes up. Call the listed agents and Once you have a casting director, though, what about contracts?
Typically, the production will provide a contract, and you will go through and redline it and make any changes you need to it. And this all goes to the negotiating your rate and whatever else. So producers provide you with the contract, you redline it, you send it back to them. On bigger budget stuff, there's an attorney involved. So there's another person involved that it goes through, and he's actually creating contracts as well. And then the producers are redlining the crew contracts, and then they're sent to the crew, and then each crew member either signs it or doesn't, or negotiates the rate or whatever they need to do as well. So typically, long story short, production provides you with the contract.
Contracts are important, and you'll benefit from having them ready before you get going. We'll dive into contracts and how to get those together for your micro-budget film in the episodes focused on pre-production. But what about back-end points? Does a casting director like Rachel accept a percentage of film profits as payment?
I think it's a great way for micro-budget filmmakers to show their respect for your work. I think it's a way for them to be like, I understand this is a micro-budget and everyone might not be getting their rates, but to show you that I respect your work and that you've done a great job, I would like to give you some back-end points. I think that's a really respectful way to show that.
However, this needs to be on top of payment, not a replacement. The thing is, anyone who's not a con artist will tell you that there's never any guarantee a film will make money back. We've covered this amply before.
So if you have approached or been approached for a project and you decide, you go through how much time it will consume, how often you'll be working on it, you'll go through how many characters you're casting or whatever else, and decide on your rate. And so say it's a flat rate and you've chosen it and that's what you're comfortable with, and you present that to the producer or director or whoever is hiring you. And they come back at you and say, well, I can't do that, but I'll give you a third of that plus 4 back-end points when the film starts making money. On this level of filmmaking, when it is that micro-budget, there is no guarantee that film will make a cent back. And so that, on this level, that is a real gamble. And so you do not want to overwork yourself. You don't want to be spending a month on a project and get paid very, very little for that if it's taken away from other projects or it's not just worth your time. It is a project by project scenario. If it's a friend doing that, of course, throw them a bone, but it's not a guarantee that the film will make money, and so the back-end points really, they're just not a guarantee.
So any experienced actor or crew member will rarely take back-end profit participation in lieu of payment unless it's a favor, or if you're a bankable filmmaker, you have bankable stars, and the thing is more than likely going to make some money. And a professional who you're just meeting has no reason to go out on this kind of limb for you. Other collaborators with greater buy-in who believe in you and the project more might, but not a new collaborator. So you should expect to pay your casting director their desired rate or some negotiated compromise. This is what I did. And then added a little bonus in profit participation because I thought Rachel did such a great job. Now, what many may be wondering is, what do you do if you can't afford a casting director?
Just to be making sure to keep the casting calls and emails really clear and professional and kind, if you are taking it on yourself. Clear, professional, and kind. Really important when you're casting. You want to get the details right, and you don't want to lose emails from potential actors. I think in a smaller place with less of a scene, I think it's social media. I think that's what it's come down to this day and age. If you're in a smaller city that doesn't have as much of a scene, but there's still somewhat of a scene, then you could go to the different groups that may exist for that city. We up in Portland had Portland actors and those groups, and they might exist in the smaller cities. And the other thought would be to find a local theater and ask the director of the theater or people around the theater for after recommendations, or make a flyer or post or something. I don't know, like in that situation, maybe open auditions would be an option, and just to see what you get. It'd be a lot of work, if you don't have the resources of a casting director or the agencies or whatnot. And a huge part of that is in the writing process, to make it achievable, so that it's not a $2 million film that you're trying to make in a small town with few resources,
It's preferable to have a casting director, but if you absolutely can't, I believe in you. You can do it. As long as you keep it small, simple, know where to look, and stay super organized to prevent overwhelm. And for that organization, I went ahead and asked Rachel what her process actually looks like. Now, get your notebook out, because if you're going it alone, Rachel's about to drop on you everything you'll need. You ready? Go.
I create a Google Drive folder for the film. Of one folder for years, it was named Counterintelligence. And within that folder, I'll create Google spreadsheets to stay organized with my list of actors that I'm bringing in for auditions. I have one sheet for all of the actors who respond to the social media casting calls. I'll have their full name, the role they're auditioning for, and their email or agency listed. And then I'll have a separate sheet for all the actors I'm reaching out to the agents for. I'll have this one organized by not only role, but also each agency. And then a third sheet is for the audition schedules. For the first round of auditions, I'll schedule them in 10-minute increments. And then for the callbacks, which is a separate sheet, I'll ask the director how they would like to do them. If there are 3 actors that we're bringing back for one role and we need to see their chemistry with our co-star, and we have 3 actors coming back for that role, we may have all 6 actors come in at the same time so that we can see every possible combination and find the right chemistry and the right 2 actors. But if we're not needing to test that chemistry, I'll suggest at least 15 or 20 minutes with each callback so that the director has time to work with the actor and see if they're able to take his or her direction well. And then the last sheet is the final cast. And this one will include their name, headshot, role, contact information, and agency's information. I'll also include any notes or scheduling conflicts that may have come up during the auditioning process. Because that is one thing I'll ask, is if they have anything that would conflict with the projected shoot date. And then throughout the casting call process, I'll have a lot of actors emailing me their info and headshots, so I want to make sure to create a separate folder or 2 in my Gmail so that they don't get buried or missed. And for your film, I believe I had a folder called Counter Audition, and then one called Counter Node for the rejections. And so I would sort them as I went, so they wouldn't just get buried with all my other emails. And then I'll work with the director to choose sides for the audition. So sometimes they'll have specific scenes that they want to see. Other times they'll ask my opinion, and I'll always give advice on the length of the scene, just because I know how long each audition will take, and I don't want us to get behind with the schedule.
So you've got organization down. Who do you go to get the ball rolling?
I will start by going to the agency's website to look through all of their talent headshots. By then, I already have a list going of the actors that I know I want to request from the agency. So I'm adding to this list based on headshots of actors that I may not have thought of, or I may not have seen or know in person. I'll then create a projected audition schedule. I'll always try to group the actors from each agency together, but allow myself some wiggle room with that. I always schedule the actors with agents first, lock their times down, and then I'll fill in all the blanks with the actors who reached out through the casting calls on social media.
And in case you need some extra help with how to reach out,
So I say, I hope this email finds you well. I'm casting a feature film and would love to bring in several actors from your roster. I've listed all of the information below, including which of your talent we would like to audition. I've also attached each character side to this email. And so I'll go ahead and send them this email, and then I'll tell you what's in it. But I'll also attach as PDFs the sides for the audition, so that the agent can give the sides to each of their actors, so that they can prepare them for the audition. So I'll list the feature film name, so Counterintelligence, along with like a brief description of the plot, and then I'll list the director, the production company, the pay, the audition date, and the callback date, because by this point, the director and producers and I have already locked down dates for the auditions. And then I'll list the audition callback, audition or callback location, and be very specific about parking and whatnot in this. And then I say project shoot. So if there are already dates locked down, for this we had mid to late July. So they weren't locked down yet, but we knew a range, and that's how a lot of auditions are, where there's a range. So if I was an actor and I got this email, but I was already booked on a feature that was shooting mid to late July, I wouldn't necessarily be available for this. And then wardrobe for all characters, I said business or business casual for this one. And then projected shoot days. So we have your two main characters at 5 days each, the driver for one, and so each character is listed how many dates they will be needed. And then I said, if someone is unable to make the audition but interested in the project, we're happy to accept a taped audition sent to my email, turned in anytime before May 23rd. And then I've got the character breakdown listed for the characters that we were auditioning. And then I say we would like to see the following of your talent on Monday, May 23rd. And then I've got very specific times, specific actors, and then in parentheses next to that, I have their character names. So, for example, 8:10 a.m., Rick Sadel, and then I've got driver / Senator Buck Henry. And then Dennis, or whichever agent, and I will go back and forth, and he'll tell me, these ones are available, these ones aren't. Have you thought of this person for this role? And I really do appreciate when agents do that as well, because they want to get their talent out there as well. And so if they feel that I didn't ask for someone that they think might fit it, they will suggest it. And I do like that a lot. And then we'll lock them down for the times for the audition. And so I'm taking my spreadsheets and I'm kind of color coding them with confirmed auditions and whatnot.
And what about social media?
I create a casting call that's similar to that email. It's got the breakdowns and the days and the rates and all that stuff. And I'll post it on Facebook and other social networks. And I'll post it in Portland. What I found to be really, really helpful is posting it in like Portland Film and Video Networking and Portland Actors, the groups that are for the film industry up in Portland and for the acting community. And so it'll say casting call and then have all that information, and please email your headshot and resume to my email.
And then there's Craigslist.
Because it's just not as reputable as it used to be. With the agents combined with the social media outreach, I don't know. I don't find that Craigslist is necessary.
After you've reached out, scheduling's done, you have a place to host, and the auditions are done, you knock out callbacks by reaching back out to the agents or unrepresented actors. Then, once you've made your picks, you lock them in.
When the director has decided on their cast, I will then let the agent know who we have decided on. So we would like to lock down Brian Cook for the role of Abel. They will let them know, and then they send me all of the measurements for wardrobe, and they will confirm that the actor is locked down for the date range that we gave them. We'll also go back and forth when it does come down to scheduling, because the agent absolutely needs to know when their actor is booked on something, so that they don't try to send them to an audition when they're shooting on your film. On a bigger budget level, we as casting directors do come up with the crew deal memos, and are working with the actors and the actors' agents in that way as well. And then the producers will have a contract that the actor sign as well, or some sort of a talent release on the low budget level as well.
In our case, Rachel provided contracts from her own production company. I reviewed them for any changes needed, and in your case, I'd strongly recommend consulting a lawyer to review the legalese and fine print. You can't depend on a casting director to have these contracts for you in many situations, and it's better to have your own reviewed by a lawyer you know. I've just dealt with these contracts enough to know what's standard. Anyway, you should have them ready long before you're ready to lock in talent, because once it gets to that point, things start moving really, really fast, and agents and actors start wanting all the information for scheduling and a ton of other stuff. The more you can have set up and push button, the better. Bottom line of this entire process:
to make sure that the actors that I brought in are happy, that the agent's happy, that the director's happy, and that there's no miscommunication as far as rates or how many days they'll be shooting or stuff like that goes. It's kind of just making sure that everyone is protected and happy in that way.
Making everyone happy, keeping everyone protected. All the organization, outreach, time, and energy aside, those are the jobs of the casting director throughout the process. If it's you, the producer, handling the casting director role, then at some point, you'll also have to switch and put on your director-producer hat to focus on finding the best possible representation of the character for your vision. But just know that the work of casting is very process-oriented. It requires a great deal of communication, patience, and facilitation. It's one more job you'll have to do that forces you to set your creativity aside for a second in order to knock out some day-to-day back and forth and technicality. The more time you spend on this type of stuff, the less time you have to spend on your creative vision. But again, if your script and story fit the money you're working with, you can make most things work, whether it's finding the perfect casting director to help you serve your vision or finding the perfect cast to bring it to life. If you're enjoying the podcast, don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or wherever you listen. While you're there, you could totally leave us a rating or a comment or both if you so choose. Those are easy ways to help spread the word to other listeners who like the same stuff as you. Music for the show comes from our film, Counterintelligence, and was composed by the great Noah Simons, who you can find on SoundCloud or Bandcamp as Larians, Larians, and his band, Male Blonding, on Bandcamp, iTunes, and Spotify. They're super good. Make This Movie is brought to you by Showhawk Media. If you're a filmmaker who wants even more useful info and tools, visit showhawk.com/makethismovie and sign up to access our free micro-budget producer starter kit, including template spreadsheets, documents, and other great stuff we cover throughout this series, ready for you to fill in the blanks. That's showhawk.com/makethismovie. Visit counterflick.com for more information on Counterintelligence, the movie, including fun stuff like our satirical fake news page. Also on Facebook is Counterintelligence, Twitter, and Instagram @Counterflick. I'm Chris Socker. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Bring along the sound guy for location scouting if that happens, because you may think you're listening to something, but you're thinking about what it looks like, you're thinking about the action, you're thinking about all these other things, and you don't notice there's a big, huge factory next door.